I want to switch gears. We'll start, Steve, with you. Since all of y'all have implemented with Evernest recently, so you don't try not to use Evernest in the story, but what are some of the most common challenges other property managers other than Evernest make, or mistakes that they face when implementing new technology solutions? Let me repeat that because I butchered it. What are some of those common challenges or mistakes property managers face when implementing new technology solutions?
Yeah. So I think this actually ties in pretty nicely to our AI discussion, because I think AI has become a really popular and prominent topic of discussion. And a lot of the time people don't know why they're choosing to implement AI, right? So with our space, right, if you look at property management, one thing that we know for certain is that folks like Evernest and like many people on the call are domain experts in property management. And we as technology providers, Matthew, Ray, and myself, are not meant to replace any of the core functionality that you guys are doing because we simply don't have the same domain expertise. Our role as technology providers, in the same way that AI plays a role as a technology provider, is to make your process and ultimately your profitability more efficient. So one of the big mistakes that we see is running to technology because you think that everyone else is doing it, running to implement a project just because you think this is what's going to keep you one step ahead of the competition. If you approach things in a first principles way, as Evernest has done, and said, all right, Evernest, using Findigs as an example, they came to us saying, hey, we have a problem. We don't know if the applications that we're getting can be underwritten against, if there's an element of fraud that's occurring with them, and we're getting too many of them. So coming in with crystal clear KPIs. Our goal is to get to same-day processing of applications. Our goal is to get to a reduction in our evictions. Our goal is to get to less time spent manually looking at applications. All of these things, they're clear KPIs that you can measure technology against. If you're coming in just because you think that it makes sense to implement technology, a lot of people actually don't need to implement technology, in my opinion. If you have a small business that you can run very efficiently and you don't have ambitions of scaling it to 10x what it is today, you're probably perfectly suitable with a couple of really good generalists. But the mistake that we see is people thinking, okay, the way to do this is just do it with technology, and then not going 2 steps deeper and saying, what am I actually looking at of a technology provider? How am I going to judge them on their success? So ultimately what this comes down to is being able to look and say, hey, is this technology provider accomplishing the goal that I wanted it to? Otherwise, what we've seen in many cases is people don't come in with that mentality. And then we get a whole slew of requests that says, oh, this is a little bit different than the way that we did it. We want you to implement these 5 things to make it more like the way that we did it. And at that point, you're really just using technology for the sake of using technology, in the same way that you'd be using AI for the sake of saying, hey, we have an AI chat program, etc. So I think the clearer that you can be on, all right, how am I going to measure ROI? Because we get really hung up on this, right? This sounds oftentimes people like Findigs and Property Meld and Appfolio, we have really good salespeople. So they can talk to you, they can get your attention, they can build a story. But if you're not coming into that decision saying, all right, what am I actually looking to accomplish out of this? And how do I know if it's working? And that's night and day between a successful rollout and an unsuccessful one.
Yep, technology salespeople are some of the best. Ray, same question for you. What are the most common challenges that you see people face when trying to implement tech?
So I'll just preface it by saying Property Meld is a tool. It's it's a relatively standard process. It's got configurations, but what's really interesting is that you can have results or outcomes that are super different, even though it's the same tool. And so you start to understand how much people play into the part of technology, and it's everything, right? It's everything from how do you train, what are your internal processes of how you use that technology, and ultimately how prepared you are. So you can have different outcomes. The other thing I think it is prudent for the technology providers to not just figure out how to make the widget operate 15, 20% better of what somebody thinks should operate, but I think like the whole AI conversation, how do we lead and figure out where these are to how we enable the environment to solve the problem? So for us at Property Meld, we've always looked at maintenance as not just how do we make it better today, but where's it going to go tomorrow and how do we make that easier? And so I think that's a requirement as you're part of doing it. And so what do they get wrong is I think there's an element of one, you have to be prepared in change management. I think that's probably one of the biggest prerequisites for success. But 2, I think the biggest part is you need to look at the technology provider as a partner and evaluate really what does it look like, not just today, does it solve the problem today, but how's it going to solve the problem tomorrow? And do they think about solving the problem in the same way?